come to order. It is 7 o'clock, which means it's time to start our January 16th meeting of the Advisory and Finance Committee at the Great Hall of the town of Plymouth. And I hope this meeting has a lot less drama than yesterday, and that we get through things a lot quicker and get you guys on your way. So, having said that, let's go right to the call of order and the roll, and a simple here. We'll check you in. Ms. Butler.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Cabana.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Howard.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Lally.
Here.
Welcome back to town. Thank you. Mr. Lawler.
Present.
Mr. Pizarro.
Here.
Ms. Richards.
Here.
Ms. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Shaw.
Here.
Ms. Tompkins.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Zuccaroli.
Here.
Wow, 15 for 15. What a start. Okay. All right, now for the fine print. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format, with some participants, as you can see, attending virtually, and others, as you can see, are here physically. This meeting will be airing on Comcast 9. That's a new channel, Comcast 9, Verizon 47, or PAC TV's YouTube channel, which can be viewed at pactv.org/stream. The ground rules here are any speaker giving public comment is allotted up to 5 minutes in which to speak. Public comment can be made at the beginning or at the end of each meeting, or in regard to a particular item on the agenda the speaker wishes to be heard. Anyone who wants to attend the meeting virtually, including members of the public who wish to give public comment, can use one of the following methods in which to do so. You can join by Zoom. Our meeting code or ID is 995-2986-0638, passcode 100131. You can join by the website, zoom.us, or the app, or you can join by telephone, where we will just see your number and hear your voice. We will not see your picture. And that phone number is 929-205-6099. Meeting code is the same, 995-2986-0638. And enter meeting passcode 100131. Okay, now that the fine print's out of the way, are there any members of the public who would like to start off with a comment? Seeing and hearing none, the items on our agenda for tonight is to approve the minutes of January 10, it's updated 10, not 11, the meeting, review the town meeting annual articles, Article 8, Facility Capital Maintenance Stabilization and Nuclear Stabilization Funds, and Article 9, Capital. Now, our good friend and my predecessor, prudent statesman Kevin Canty, purposefully kept us up late last night to hear the Select Board discuss Articles 8 and 9. So most of our questions should be answered, but I will entertain additional discussion tonight, if you had a chance to go home and sleep on it. So let's get to work. Approval of the minutes of January 10, 2024 meeting. I assume that everybody has had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any edits, additions, modifications, deletions? Hearing none. Can I get a motion from Ms. Butler to approve the minutes? I'm sorry.
There needs to be a correction made.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did not see your digital hand. Mr. Cabana.
There needs to be a correction made. To approve the minutes of January 10th, not January 11th.
Correct.
On the meeting notes.
That's the update, right. It was listed on the agenda as January 11, but that meeting was January 10. You are correct. I don't think that's a minute. Is that in the minute? Yes, the minutes reflect, it's just the agenda did not reflect the correct date, Mr. Cabana.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I have a motion by Ms. Butler. Could I get a second, please, from Mr. Dunn?
Second.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes of January 10? Hearing and seeing none, I will take a vote on the roll call to approve the minutes of January 10. Ms. Butler, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
I did attend part of the meeting that evening, and I also reviewed the recording prior to tonight, so I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Abstain.
Ms. Shaw?
Abstain.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli?
Yes.
So that's 13 for and 2 abstain, for the record, Jeanette. Thank you for that. Okay. Moving right along to Article 8, Facility Capital Maintenance Stabilization and Nuclear Stabilization Funds. This article is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer for available funds a sum of money to the Facility Capital Maintenance Stabilization Fund and the Nuclear Stabilization Fund as authorized by the provisions of General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, as amended, or take any other action relative thereto. So I just wanted to make a quick note on this for our committee here. This was discussed yesterday, and I thought we had a really thorough presentation. But Ms. Barrett, if you would like to, for the record, make any comments, you are welcome to.
I just wasn't sure if you wanted a sort of a presentation, but as you know, you sat through last night. This is one of the, or two of the selectmen goals is to put money towards the Holtec nuclear mitigation fund, and also to put money towards the facility maintenance stabilization fund, and they're doing that in this article.
And that is $500,000 for each fund.
Yes.
So just to sort of recap from yesterday, the Nuclear Stabilization Fund, Holtec has hundreds of acres of land. Is it hundreds? It's a lot of land.
Yeah, it's over 1,500 acres.
1,500 acres that will become available. The town has been putting money into this fund to be prepared to possibly purchase the land for various uses as it sees fit. So this just adds another $500,000. Is it $9 million already in the fund?
About $8.5 million right now, and after this, there'd be a little over $9 million.
Right. Okay. Any questions for Ms. Barrett?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Howard, you have the floor.
Lynn, I'm glad that you're here. Good evening. We've spent a considerable amount of time last night talking about the challenges facing the operating budget. So I want to know if voting down Article 8 would allow the town to move closer to addressing the challenges being faced by within the operational budget. Can you speak to that question, please?
I mean, I'll make a comment, and then I do see our town manager, Derek Brindisi, is in the room, so he could probably comment to it also. But, I mean, we have many challenges in addition to just the regular operating budget, but we have challenges with capital, which we're going to talk about tonight, and then, challenges with our future, with regards to the town. So either voting voting that article down does not mean that any of that money would be available for the operating budget. That's really, as far as if the select board or town manager wanted to recommend that, but I'll let Derek maybe address your question also.
Yeah, happy to answer those questions. I would say that, as Ms. Barrett pointed out, we have well-documented problems in our facilities, especially our fire stations. And the select board is very intentional on trying to cure some of these longstanding problems and no longer wanting to kick the can down the road when it comes to facilities and roads in particular. So that's what the intention is behind this year's budget. Certainly, Mr. Howard, to your question, any dollars that are in this year's budget could be reappropriated for other means. But we were trying to be very conscious of the priorities of the select board in creating this year's budget.
Mr. Howard, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you for your responses. I am in general supportive of both the facility capital maintenance stabilization fund, as well as the nuclear stabilization fund. But I'm also very concerned about the operating budget shortfall that we're potentially facing. And we'll speak to capital in just a minute. So I have real mixed feelings on Article 8, which is $1 million in total and could go quite a ways to addressing our operational shortfall. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Barrett, Finance Director, or Mr. Brindisi, the Town Manager?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Cabana? Lally. Why can't I see your
Sorry, I
digital
couldn't figure out how to raise my hand in this new version. What does what's 1%, what does $1 million do to the tax levy in terms of the percentage? I'm just trying to get a number to work with during this process.
So based on our current year's to fiscal 2024's levy and our based on the 2024 valuations of the town and raising $1 million on the levy, that's approximately, it's like around 6 cents per $1,000 of value when you look at a $500,000 home.
So, but in terms of the budget, are you saying it's 0.6% of the budget, or is it something less than that or more than that?
It's hard to hear you, Mr. Lally.
Okay, sorry. What's the total budget at the moment as proposed?
So the total budget, operating budget, including enterprise funds and including our state and county assessments, is about $315 million.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is 315 million, or one over 300.
The operating budget is separate from this $1 million. So the 315 million is our operating budget. This is a separate article, so it's not part of the operating budget.
Right. I think what Mr. Lally was getting at is, could we use that money toward operating if we forego it in this article? Is that what would it kind of help shorten that gap that we're having? I think that's what he's getting at, but it sounds like it's a fairly negligible amount of money. And it also, is that mandated by the town? Is this fund, are we putting $500,000 into these funds every year by some mandate from the past?
We have fiscal policies that recommend us to continually set aside funds, for into the nuclear mitigation and into our facility maintenance fund, but we don't have like a mandate, that we have to put in a certain sum every year.
Okay, so if you decided for some reason to forego putting money into those funds, that wouldn't violate any agreements or contracts or provisions in the town? Okay, thank you. Mr. Pizarro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett, thank you for coming tonight. I just had one simple question. You mentioned that the Nuclear Stabilization Fund has $8.5 million in it. What does the Facility Capital Maintenance Fund currently have?
Facility capital maintenance currently has $5.9 million.
Okay. And then typically these stabilization funds, it sounds like they're, and forgive me if I'm being a novice here. This is my first cycle in the spring budget as an ANF member. These sound like a bank, a piggy bank, right? Savings account. Do we drain it every year, or we're putting $500,000 in each one? Are we just waiting to spend that at some point in time in the future?
Yes, that's correct. So it is a savings account, a set aside, for a future, project or a future, sale of the Holtec property or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Barrett. No further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Barrett or Mr. Brindisi? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to entertain a motion. Mr. Young, would you like to move to approve Article 8?
I make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Lawler, would you like to second that motion?
Second the motion.
Thank you so much. Any discussion on the committee? I see hands up. Mr. Zuparoli, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think we need to be really careful about how we're thinking about this article. 1,500 acres is a lot of land, and I think we need to help ensure that the town is in a position to buy all or part of this land when the time comes. For us to cut this stabilization fund short, I believe we'd be doing the town a great disservice. I plan on supporting this article.
Thank you, Mr. Zuparoli. Mr. Howard, the floor is yours.
Mr. Lawler, I wanted to ask you what your thinking is on this. Is this, I recognize that it's 1/3 of 1% of the operating budget, but is this the kind of action that this committee needs to be taking to address a potential future shortfall?
Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I, too, I'm very concerned with any spending from this point forward, considering the fact that there are a lot of things that have changed and a lot of things that are looming in the background, especially for the surprise that the taxpayer is about to receive. In this particular case, having heard the presentation from last night and actually taking a position for the first time in a long time regarding the future planning and the future savings of monies going towards a future endeavor. I think it's a good idea. But I am, like you, Mr. Howard, very guarded and very concerned about the upcoming discussions that we're going to have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Mr.
one
Howard,
follow-on-
did that
one
answer your
follow-on
question?
comment to
You follow up?
Just one follow-on comment to this. I'd be inclined to approve this. Although I think town meeting should discuss the merits of continuing to fund the reserve accounts for these purposes. But I support the article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Ms. Rogers, I see your digital hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I do have concerns about savings funds similar to this, if that's what the term that we're going to use, with our operating budget being where it's at. I know that the answer wasn't totally clear as to whether this money would go back into the operating budget or if it can, but I do think that it's concerning that, we're saying, oh, $1 million is a drop in the bucket, but $1 million in our operating budget can mean, and I'm not trying to harp on it from last night, but can mean saving some of our educators' jobs. So I do think there is something to be said about approving these savings fund like improvements, if you will, at this juncture. That's not to say that I don't look towards the future, and I do appreciate Mr. Zuccarelli's comments as it relates to how big the parcel of land is and how much it could potentially cost. But if you think about it in terms of, paying your bills today or putting money in your savings account, you're going to lose your house because you haven't paid your mortgage, or you have a little bit extra in your savings account. And I think that we are very close to that part right now. So I don't know that I will be able to.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rogers. Ms. Barrett, could I get a clarification? If we voted this down and the town did not put $1 million in these funds, or $500,000 each, that money would not go to operational. Is that correct? Did I understand you correctly? Because I think that's what's at issue here is this a savings that would go toward helping the deficit that we feel we're facing in the budget?
No, not necessarily. Every action at town meeting is an appropriation to fund something from a funding source. So town meeting has every right, to do what they want based on the articles, that are presented to them at town meeting.
Okay, so in effect, $1 million savings here could, with town meeting's approval, go toward operations. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Dunn, floor is yours.
I think we're complicating it. If we vote to spend $1 million, then we'll spend $1 million. If we don't, we won't spend $1 million. It'll be collected and we won't spend it.
Well, I'm not sure we won't spend it. Wouldn't it be allocated? Wouldn't it
We
be
won't if we don't appropriate it, or if town meeting doesn't appropriate it. What I'm saying is if we don't recommend that they appropriate it and they take our recommendation, then we won't spend it. If we do recommend that they make the appropriation and they do it, then we'll spend it. But it'll still be, like, it's either $1 million that we spend or $1 million that we don't spend.
Okay. Mr. Lally, I see your digital hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the forward thinking of this motion. I do think the condition of our facilities.
You get closer to the mic.
Okay. I do think the condition of our facilities is more important than perhaps setting aside for the Holtec acquisition at some future date. And if I had a choice between the two, I would vote for the facilities set aside and not for the Holtec. But I understand that's not the motion on the table. Thank you.
If you make a motion to separate them, I'll second it.
I think we have a motion on the floor right now that we have to act on, and we're in discussion about that.
We do have a motion to approve Article 8. So we need to vote on that motion first, correct? Before we entertain a counter. So, yeah, Ms. Shaw. So, at this point-
I just wanted to echo Ms. Rogers' comments and say that I agree wholeheartedly. And for all of those reasons, I will be voting no.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shaw. Yes, Mr. Green.
I would just take issue with the statement that $1 million is chump change. I mean, I'm looking at the town manager's budget presentation from yesterday, and we have on one side, Prop 2.5 increase is 5.4 million. On the other side, expenditures reserve for nuclear mitigation and facilities is 1 million. That 1 million is 18% of the 5. So it's not really chump change. This is serious dollars.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain an amendment to this if you wanted to separate out and vote separately. But I need a
Yeah, motion to separate the two.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to separate from Article 8 the facility capital maintenance stabilization fund from the nuclear stabilization fund and vote on those separately.
I'll
All right.
second that motion.
Okay, so who said second? Ms. Richards has, yeah, Ms. Richards has seconded that motion. Any discussion on this amendment to split up the two stabilization funds?
And just again, a point of order, do we have to vote on the first motion first and vote it down and then move to separate it?
Yeah,
'Cause-
I think that's the proper thing. So
Okay.
we'll go back to, we've got a motion on the table, and we've gone through discussion. Ms. Rogers, you have your hand up. Did you want to make a comment before we vote on the original article?
No.
Okay.
I think, did Mr. Green make the motion? I think he could just withdraw his motion too.
I can withdraw the original motion.
If you want to. Okay. Are you?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to withdraw the original motion.
Okay. So that puts now the motion on the table to separate out the two items. So that's all we're voting on. We're not voting on those items at this point. We're just voting on the separation of these two items. Correct? Okay. Let's go to the roll call. Ms. Butler, how do you vote on separating out these two stabilization funds? Ms. Butler?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Oh. I felt the earth
Just
shake here. I was kind of
I know.
wondering if there's an earthquake coming through.
Don't rush me.
Tick, tick,
No.
tick. Okay, thank you. Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Bizzarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli?
No.
Okay, so there were 2 noes and 12 yeses. So we are going to separate these out. So let's take the facilities capital maintenance stabilization fund first. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve $500,000 to go into that stabilization fund?
So moved.
So moved. This is-
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Dunn, and it sounded like Mr. Cabana seconded that motion. Any discussion? Okay, how do you vote on setting aside $500,000 to the capital maintenance stabilization fund? Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler? And we have a call-in. How would you like to vote? Mr. Lawler? Are you thinking, or are you muted?
I am thinking.
Oh.
Thank you.
Should I come back to you?
Yes, please.
All right. Mr. Pizarro,
No.
Ms. Richards,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers,
No.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins,
No.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli.
Yes.
And the time has come, Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to pressure you. Okay, so this passes. I see a lot of yeses. I see a 12 to 2. Is that what you see, Jeanette? But 3 noes?
I have 3. How did
There were-
Mr. Pizarro?
Yeah, there are 3 noes. Yep.
How
So
did Mr. Pizarro vote?
yeah, there were 3 noes.
Okay, 3 noes.
So it should be 11 to 3. We just approved the facility capital maintenance stabilization money. Okay. Now, we are going to, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the nuclear stabilization fund. Let's go to Mr. Howard. Would you like to move to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Zuccaroli?
Second.
Oh, okay, Ms. Rogers is seconding the motion. We can have discussion on whether or not to approve the nuclear stabilization funds of $500,000. Yes, I'll start with Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is with great concern that I state to my fellow members that things are different. The fear of bumping up against Prop 2.5 restrictions, the fear of a budget that is somewhat very much out of control, a fear for our taxpayers having to consider a unusual tax hike. I think now is the time. I think now is the time that we reconsider spending. I think now is the time that we, as a committee, think about setting a mark, making a statement that we need fiscal control. And I believe that the intention is in the right direction about the stabilization fund. I really believe has the right intention. I think it has the right futuristic operation and direction. But the budget that we're working on right now really needs our attention as a group. It needs a real second scan. And I want my fellow members to please pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler, for those comments. I see a digital hand from Mr. Zuccaroli. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Neerman. I just have a question about the last vote. I had 4 no votes, not 3. Is it possible to check that?
I agree, Mr. Chairman. I thought there were 4 no
There were
votes.
4? Mr. Pizarro.
So if you want to take a poll of those that voted no, we could raise our hands or something.
Okay, so it should be, all right, it should be 10 to 4. I mean, it doesn't particularly alter the result, but for the record, it's 10 to 4. Thank you for being precise. Okay, do we have any comments on the nuclear stabilization fund before we go to vote? Okay.
Again, I'm just going to echo the comment that I made earlier. This 1,500 acres is a lot of land, and I think the town needs to secure its future.
Thank you, Mr. Zuccarelli, for that. Ms. Butler, the floor is yours.
I'm betwixt and between. I agree with Mr. Lawler that we need the money for the town. I understand that. But I also look at this amount of land and say, if we lose that and someone takes it, they could do a lot of damage to Plymouth. So I feel like we should be in control of that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Mr. Dunn,
I would like.
yours.
Thank you. I wouldn't like to make a habit out of not putting this money in, but I don't know if it's appropriate this year. I also don't think down the road that $500,000 is going to make a huge difference. It will if we don't put it in every year. But given the operational situation we're in, I'm planning to vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I thought I saw a digital hand, but that came down. Okay. Ms. Richards, the floor is yours.
I think I would like to echo Mr. Dunn in saying that, you know, we already have $8.5 million in that stabilization fund. I think we voted yes on this. I voted yes on the facilities fund simply because, you know, things happen, and things happen in our facilities area that may need our attention and in a more important way than purchasing property and purchasing land. And although I do look at that Holtec property as being important, I do agree with Mr. Dunn that we can hold off on the $500,000 this year and put it towards for a better use, especially looking at the budget. And we're going to have to really make some hard decisions going down the line, and this is going to be the first hard decision we have to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richards, for that comment. I see a digital hand from Mr. Lally. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think on the facilities fund, that's a must-do. And for the whole tech property, as much as I would like to do it, I think it's a nice to do. And since we're having to make hard choices, I think it starts tonight, and that's why I'll be voting no on this particular motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Any more discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, I will go to the roll call. We are voting to approve or reject Article 8, the Nuclear Stabilization Fund. Ms. Butler, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Cabana?
No.
Mr. Dunn?
No.
Mr. Green?
No.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Lally?
No.
Mr. Lawler?
No.
Mr. Pizarro?
No.
Ms. Richards?
No.
Ms. Rogers?
No.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
No.
And Mr. Zuccarelli?
Yes.
So that is a 12-2 vote to reject funding the Nuclear Stabilization Fund. Okay. I thought that was going to be the easier of the two articles, but you just never know until you show up. Okay, now we're going on to Article 9 to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate transfer from available funds or borrow a sum of money for the construction and or repair and or purchase and or lease and or replacement of departmental buildings and or equipment and or capital facilities for various departments of the town and or for feasibility and other types of studies or to authorize contracts or lease/purchase agreements for such purposes for terms of 3 or more years as follows, or take any other action relative thereto, or take any other action relative thereto. So again, like we did with the stabilization fund, if there is an item or items that you feel you want to reject, but the rest of the items you want to approve, you're welcome to make an amendment and pull those items out, and we will vote on them separately. So those are the ground rules. So Ms. Barrett, do you have any comments for us to start?
So working off of the amended memo that was emailed to you, to the group yesterday,
Correct.
this Article 9 is presented to you as recommendations of our capital that was reviewed by our Capital Improvements Committee. So we have a bylaw that every year departments have to submit anything that's over $15,000 and also has a useful life of greater than 5 years of a town asset. So all of these projects that are on the attached list meet that definition under our bylaw. And as part of Article 9, there is a group of them totaling $33,778,688 that we are recommending in Article 9. There are other projects on here that potentially are going to go to our special town meeting, and then there's another one that is going to a CPC article under Article 16D, which you will be reviewing next week. So anyway, included in this is a whole laundry list of projects. The departments are here if there are any specific questions regarding those. The funding sources for these projects is free cash, $9,126,626. Raise and appropriate from the tax levy, $1.5 million. Other available funds and grants of $7.6 million. Sewer retained earnings, $1.4. Water retained earnings, $123,000. Airport retained earnings of $380,000. And then borrowing of $13.5 million. The town manager's recommendation includes $3 million towards the road improvement program. Is a top priority of the Select Board in their 2024 goals and priorities. Have to be funded from free cash, the other half from the levy. In addition to this capital funding, DPW will also be allotted approximately $1.6 million in Chapter 90 funds, and then an additional $790,000 from the Massachusetts Millionaire Surtax, which would be making a total commitment towards roads of almost $5.4 million. Also, the amount recommended to be borrowed, the town anticipates reducing this amount by at least $2.5 million in grant funding for the sewer tertiary project. So the town has already received notification that it is receiving this grant, but it's a reimbursement grant. So we have to authorize the money at town meeting, spend it, and then we will request reimbursement, and that'll reduce the amount that we're going to fund. At the same time, we're also pursuing grants for some of the other projects. For example, the town pier, like rehabilitation projects and that kind of thing. So any other grants that we were to get would reduce the amount that the town would actually have to borrow. So if there are any questions regarding this, the departments are here tonight to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barrett. I see Mr. Howard chomping at the bit. The floor is yours.
Ms. Barrett, before you sit down, too late. Similar question. We're looking to borrow roughly $13 million and $13.5 million, although you said that might be decreased. So depreciation over 3 years is roughly $3.5 million a year that we would be using to address that borrowed money. If we were to not approve the entire slate of capital projects, is it conceivable that we could reduce that borrowing going forward and thereby address any operational shortfalls?
I'm not really sure I understand the whole question. I don't know if you're referring to the operating budget.
No, I think what he's saying is if we knock some of the items off of this list, the capital list, would that knock the borrowing number down?
So,
and thereby the depreciation in future years.
So these projects, most of the borrowing is in the enterprise funds, a total of, let's see, in the enterprise fund.
Yeah, how much borrowing is not in the enterprise funds?
$3,884,000
Is not in the
is
enterprise
not
funds?
in the enterprise fund.
Okay, so the rest of it, and that's a zero-sum game with the enterprise funds. So that would pay for itself?
And that's actually, one of those projects is a project that's going to the special town meeting. So tonight, the projects that are being presented to you in the general fund that are recommended to be borrowing is the town wharf rehabilitation. And as I mentioned, the department is seeking grants to help possibly to reduce that borrowing. The other project is for the school, South Elementary, the rooftop unit replacement project of $1,450,000. And then, so those are the only two projects of borrowing that are in Article 9, it's a recommendation this evening, that are in the general fund. The others are in the enterprise funds.
And if I remember correctly from the CIC meeting, those two items are within the top 20 in priorities. Is that correct?
Yes, so the rooftop units is ranked as number 4, and the town wharf rehabilitation was ranked as number 9.
It's on your spreadsheets. The ranking is in the middle.
So, yeah. Okay, thank you, Ms. Barrett, because I think what I've heard is that even cutting at the low end isn't going to help us that much going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Rogers, you have your digital hand up. The floor is yours.
I do have a question for Chief Foley, if he's there.
Chief Foley. So this is Fire Chief Neil Foley. And
my
what is your question?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Specifically related to the fireboat. If you could maybe just tell me how many times in, say, the last 5 years that the fireboat was used. I'm just curious between the Coast Guard, the Harbor Master, and some of the other forces that we have that take on the water, how often the fireboat has been used.
Thank you for the question. I don't have that specific number in front of me as far as a breakdown over the last 5 years, but I would guess probably a couple dozen runs over that time period of them responding to an actual emergency on the water. But what I would say is that the boat is very specialized in what it does. There isn't another boat in the harbor that does or has the capabilities that the fireboat has. Specifically, the boat was originally purchased. A large portion of that cost was provided to us through grant process that the Coast Guard actually was putting forward because they don't do firefighting. They do respond to emergencies out on the water, but they don't have any firefighting capabilities from ship to ship. So it actually meets that requirement that the ports need through a recommendation, again, through the Coast Guard, that there is firefighting capabilities at the port. So that is a very specific use that it has. I can tell you that it has been used extensively in the planning process for the entire area, and it has quite a large response area. And again, it's very specialized for what it does. I don't know if that completely answers your question. If you care to follow up, that's fine.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just a brief follow-up. I'm assuming by the way that you were talking, this is specifically for ocean and it doesn't serve any of our ponds or anything in Plymouth, right?
That's correct. It's a boat for the ocean. It's 33-foot fireboat with firefighting capabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Mr. Pizarro's digital hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you. The question for Ms. Barrett around capital structure. I know you mentioned, if I heard correctly, the bylaw life of the asset greater than 5 years. And is it 80,000? Did I hear that correctly? Anything greater than 80,000?
Greater than 15,000.
15,000. Okay, thank you. So again, being the junior member of this Advisory and Finance Committee, I have questions around the capital structuring. Is the so each year you have a capital budget based on this bylaw, and the borrowing, and I would imagine not every year you borrow, but is that a fair statement, or is that a good understanding?
Yeah, so basically when we recommend borrowing, we look at our total debt service, principal and interest that we pay out of our budget. So a lot of our debt is what we call level principal. So the payments are much higher at the beginning of that debt service or amortization period. So we have a lot of debt that drops off, and we keep our debt service budget as a percentage of our operating budget between 6 and 8%. So as items drop off, we recommend new items in the capital funding to be placed into that debt service budget.
So the debt service is in the operating. What is that currently in terms of yearly? And that includes principal, right?
Yes. So it includes principal, it includes long-term principal and interest. It also includes possibly short-term interest, because when we do borrow, if we have to, we borrow temporarily as a project is going along, and then we will convert it to a long-term bond issue. So in the general fund, the debt service budget is a little north of $18 million right now in the 2025 recommended budget. That actually includes an increase because we are borrowing for like 2 fire stations, dredging of the harbor, a lot of projects that we have voted on in the past.
So these are bonds. So I guess these are treasury functions that your department works with someone to do. How are these each year that you go to get funding and borrowing? Is it 30 years?
Can you repeat that question?
Is it 30 years that you go to for these bonds?
So it depends on Mass General law. So Mass General laws for a building, reconstruction of a building, or the rooftop units for the school, that the maximum that you can borrow is 30 years. Sometimes we do 20 years. It all depends on, how it will fit into our debt service budget. And the shorter the term, the less cost it is because of interest and everything. So we look at all of that.
So how much is falling off this next year?
I don't have that number in front of me.
All right.
And these projects, what happens is we authorize to borrow. We actually would not incur any interest at all on short-term basis until fiscal 26. So none of these are in like the current budget for fiscal 25. They would happen in future years.
Right. But our current debt service is 18 million.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pizarro. I thought we had a hand up over here. Yes, Mr. Green.
Yeah, I just had a question on, what we're actually voting for here, because we had this CPC item on here. I know it was just discussed, and it's also in the Green Book. So is the CPC item part of Article 9?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No. So Article 9 is on that attached spreadsheet. The very first column, it says article. So
Yeah, okay.
the items labeled as Article 9, and then there's 2 items that are labeled something different. One is the special and
one's an
one is
Article 4.
16D.
Okay.
And then I
Thank you.
summarize on the second page a total for Article 9. It's highlighted, like it's in green, but I don't know if yours is color
Yep,
coded.
I got it.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Color of money.
Yeah.
While I have the floor, can I make a motion?
I think we have a few more questions that we want to ask
Sure.
here, and then I'll come back to you for that motion. Actually, I think I saw Mr. Lally first.
Yeah, Lynn, on the airport, the 380, I believe, is our 20% local funding for federal match and state match. What do the words "no vote" mean next to that in the source column? I couldn't quite figure that out.
Oh, so as far as some grants, we don't have, the federal grants and the state grants that we get for the airport project, we don't have to vote that money at town meeting. So there's no vote required for that amount. But when we present these projects to Capital Improvements Committee, we obviously have to let them know what the total project cost is and if there is other funding sources that are going to be used. And the reason why I put that in there is because then the motion at town meeting would be just for the $380,000. It wouldn't include any of those particular grants. Some
Okay,
of them
thank you very
have to
much.
vote, but these ones we don't.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Richards, to my right, the floor is yours.
This question is for Dr. Blaisdell. Is it Dr.? Please. So speaking of community preservation, and I just happened to look at the line item for Nathaniel Morton, and because we had our whole discussion about schools, has it ever come up that maybe you want to apply for community preservation monies for Nathaniel Morton because of its age and its historical significance?
We actually just recently started having those conversations because we asked those questions ourselves and didn't think of it when this was put in originally. But internally, we were wondering the same questions, and that's something that I haven't even talked to Lynn about to see how we would go about even inquiring about that piece. So it has come up just recently, but we haven't moved forward. Nathaniel Morton will need additional work in that building. Since we just put the new roof on, it's drying out. So there's a lot of work that does still need to be done after this. But we just started having those questions, and like I said, I haven't even...
Might be worth, talking to Bill, too.
If I could just add, I know that community preservation, when looking at a building project like that, even though they would possibly help fund a roof of a historic structure, but a lot of times they'd look at maybe the facade or the cupola or, different components of the building that are more historic than like the ceiling replacement inside the building.
Right. No, I was saying as a whole,
right.
Throw the ceiling in there too, along with the facade and the cupola and, anything else.
I was just giving those as examples.
Sure,
I'm not sure if that needs
I mean, I just put
it
together.
It might be on the 10-year. We have several projects on the 10-year plan, so we will certainly look at those projects and recommend them putting application to CPC.
I just put together the whole report for what the registry brought in for CPC funds, so I
don't think it's going up, right? So.
Well, no, but we had that
would
jump.
Be nice.
We had that jump 2 years ago.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Thanks.
Ms. Richards, do you have any follow-up? No, you're good.
No, thank you.
Okay. I see the digital hand of Ms. Rogers. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I was just hoping that someone from the IT department was there that could give me a brief rundown on those articles. Technology is certainly not my strong suit, so if I could just get an understanding of what exactly the the switches and things like that, what they do,
and
would be
have
helpful.
Just the person for you.
Joe Young, IT Director. There are 4 requests in front of you. The first one is fiber network expansion. This is actually year 2 of a 5-year plan we have in our 10-year capital. This is the means of connecting all the town and school buildings to each other. And we're currently at capacity. The Laserfiche upgrade and expansion and record digitization is also year 2 of a 4-year plan. And this is going to digitize the remainder of the paper records for the building department. We then have network switches, which are the excuse me, the devices that connect to the fiber. They're 6 years old. They're going to be end of life, end of support, and if we don't replace them, they will become security issues. And then we have virtual server upgrades, same story, end of life, end of support, and they become security upgrades, concerns.
Follow up, Ms. Rogers?
No, thank you. I have no idea what any of that meant, so I needed someone to dumb it down for me.
So have we enlightened you this evening? Okay. Any other questions before we entertain a motion? Oh, yes, Mr. Lawler. You are so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome again.
I have a question. Are we voting on all of this right now?
We're voting on,
Which is part of,
yeah, we're
which
voting
is
on
part of this right here? And all this right down here?
the shaded.
Shaded.
The shaded adds up to.
Which would include this right here?
So the not shaded part, is that part of?
Everything
You're
that
only
says
voting on
9.
Article 9.
Everything on Article 9 is a part of
Says
it.
ATM
So
9.
everything but the number 4 for near the bottom, the Springtown meeting, Article 4.
Okay.
And the very bottom of the next page, which is the Article 4. Yeah, there's an Article 4.
16D,
Yeah, and
which is the
16D.
capital project.
Okay.
The only thing you're not voting tonight is
It's 4 and
one
16.
DPW project and then the Town Brook Trail
Okay.
improvements.
Everything that says ATM 9 is in this.
Understood.
Yep.
Are we still under discussion?
We are not in discussion yet. We are merely questioning the witnesses.
I didn't say it.
So, are you okay with that? Let's entertain a motion so we can go to discussion. Mr. Zuccarelli, I'm so sorry. The floor is yours.
No, I was going to make the motion.
Okay, you're right on time. Mr.
So my motion was going to be to separate the enterprise fund items from the other pot as they're self-funded essentially. But I didn't intend to limit any discussion because I actually have more questions. So whatever the order of operations is, happy to oblige.
Okay, so you have made an amendment to take out the enterprise funds from the rest of the budget package, capital improvement budget package. So at this point, do I have a second to that motion to amend?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Do we have discussion on separating out the enterprise funds from the rest of the capital improvement projects?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Shaw.
What are there any articles that use both the enterprise fund and some other source of funding? Is this like what impact is this going to have on this article if we do this? Could Lynn step up and tell us that?
Well, I don't think there's any impact one way or the other. We're just pulling out items to vote separately. And as in the past, you may remember that when we've done this, we've ended up approving all of it anyway. So it was an exercise in fruition, whatever that expression
Right,
is.
I'm just concerned that if we don't do that, if there's gonna be any impact, like if there's multiple funding sources for any of the articles or anything like that.
No, there's no effect.
No
You can
effect.
divide it. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lally, we have a question?
I think as a point of order, Mr. Zipperoli made a motion, and I know that people want to amend that, but I think, does he not have to agree to that amendment in order to proceed, or can he withdraw his motion, or does he need a second? I'm just I don't want us to get us in trouble, that's all.
He just said he wanted to make one, he didn't make one.
Okay.
I heard something different, but that's okay.
The motion that I wanted to make was that we approve ATM Article 9 in its entirety.
Okay. So that is the motion on the table. But his motion was made first to approve the whole package, but we have an amendment. So I don't think it would be proper to approve the whole package and then backtrack and say, oh, by the way, we're going to vote to take stuff out. So I do believe in point of...
Can I just, before I agree to the amendment, because I think I need to agree to the amendment, can I just ask Lynn a quick question?
You can ask Lynn anything you want.
Thank you. So, Lynn, the enterprise funds, those are all self-generating funds, correct?
Correct.
All right. Then in that case, I have no problem with Mr. Green's amendment.
Okay, so you are withdrawing your motion to approve the entire package. That would be a yes. Mr. Zuccarello, it's a question.
Yeah, that would be a yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go back to Mr. Green. You have a motion to amend this Article 9. And do I have a second to that motion?
I second it.
Mr. Dunn has seconded that motion. Do we have discussion on separating the enterprise funds from the rest of the package of Article 9?
Yes, I have a...
Mr. Lawler, the floor is yours.
Lynn, I got a question. So if we were to, if I was to make a motion to, for instance, to consider removing any particular item here that has a 4 or less priority, how would that work as far as taking that money and, well, we would not be spending that money, correct? If I made a motion on these priorities that are in front of me, 4 or less.
So
4 or less. So
priority 1 through
4, 5, 6, and 7, 8 priorities, disqualify them, take them off.
So there's 43, they ranked 43 projects. And then within the enterprise funds, those are ranked based on the priority of the department. So
Right. So within the department, if it were,
my recommendation would be is if you're going to, it sounds like you're going to divide it and either vote it up or down, basically.
well, I was just trying to figure out what would happen with the money. I mean, okay, let's say we voted to eliminate all the projects that are in the particular departments that are 4 or less in priority. Where would that money go?
It wouldn't go anywhere. I mean, The funding
wouldn't spend
sources
it.
are
We wouldn't
free-
spend the money.
Yeah, I mean, the funding sources are identified in the spreadsheet.
Okay,
You see the funding sources that are
Okay.
recommended to
Okay.
fund those projects.
so we would not spend the money if any project that was defined as priority level 4 and below.
Sure, but this is the article that would go to town meeting, so someone on the floor can make a motion to move something that, if this board doesn't recommend a particular project, either the selectmen or some other, someone on the floor can make a motion to move something. So that's just letting you know.
Okay, and just to explain to the members here, it's the 1,000 death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, that's the only way I'm thinking here. So I got it down now. Thank you.
So your intent is, as I think a lot of us, is to find savings wherever we can find savings. And
Correct.
if it's a low priority item, it obviously is not something that is critically needed versus a 1, 2, or 3.
Exactly. And I'm just figuring out where would it go? Well, it would actually the monies would not be spent.
No, so our free cash policy is to set aside 10% of our free cash and let it roll over to the following year and not spend that. We also have in our fiscal policies, getting our general stabilization fund back to a 5% level, which is recommended by the Department of Revenue. So that article you're going to see in the special town meeting. The rest of that capital money, the rest of that free cash money is used for capital funding, because the only resources that we use most often for capital is free cash or borrowing or grants or other available funds, because there's not a lot of resources for capital. And we have a lot of capital needs in our buildings and our equipment, and I mean, so these are the priorities of the departments. These are part of our capital plan, and these are what we are recommending at this time.
So again, these savings are not going right into operational, I think is where.
No.
Nope.
Yeah, well, actually, I was taking Dan's idea and kind of stepping it up a bit, why not just go to the other extreme? So I'd like to, I don't know how to word it, so I need some help in the verbiage of what I want to do.
So are you planning to amend this? Because we have already amendment on the table to pull out the enterprise funds. Now you want to pull out everything that's a 4 or over, a 4 or greater or lesser in priority.
Each department's lesser priority.
Anything that does not have a 1 or 2 or 3 would get
Correct.
pulled out of this budget.
Correct.
Hold on, please. Be patient. I'll get to you.
Mr. Lally, I just want to point out that when the funding is coming from other sources, even the lower priority items may not be fully funded from free cash or borrowing. So you kind of need to look at the funding on the individual items as well as the priority before you determine whether it's appropriate to cut that item or not.
I think
It's a non-trivial process.
I think we have to vote on this before, and then you can
we
amend
need-
it even further if you want, after we vote on this.
Right, yeah, let's vote on whether or not this committee wants to pull out the enterprise funds. And because once we pull out the enterprise funds, then we can pick away at the rest of the chicken. That's if you Ms. Richards, did you have a comment you'd like to make before we go to a vote?
Well, my comment was virtually the same as Mr. Howard's, because some of these funding sources are grant money and could potentially be grant money, although they're put in there as free cash. But then down the line, I know Mr. Gould has routinely found, grant money to cover his expenditures. So to pull them out of the budget, and then so he doesn't have that capital expenditure where he could have covered it with a grant down the line, and then we would get that free cash back, and not allow him that opportunity. I just have a problem with any of his priorities. Anything on his list he could potentially get a grant for. So to not allow that opportunity, I think it would be not would be taken away from that department.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Zuccaroli for a moment because he's had his digital hand up. Mr. Zuccaroli, do you have a comment you'd like to make? The floor is yours.
The enterprise funds are self-generating funds. So if the money isn't available in the enterprise funds, then it has to go to then the funding source needs to go to borrowing. I think I'm lost in everyone's words, to be honest, but I think that I would just like to see us vote on this and then go forward.
I appreciate that. I would like to ask a question of what is the purpose of removing the enterprise funds from the rest of the package?
Yes, like Mr. Zuccaroli just said, they're self-funded other items. There's obviously a need in town, but they're more discretionary in nature. And if I were to vote one way or the other, I would favor the enterprise funds first and start thinking about the other items.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Lawler? Thinking?
I was, again, just to explain myself, I see that the departments have lower priority tasks. And I was just looking to see whether or not those lower priorities could be circumvented at this time. That was my general thinking.
Right. We understood the intent, but I think Ms. Richards makes a good point that a lot of these initiatives are, we receive grants to pay for them after the fact, a lot of times. Yes.
If I could just make one comment that may
Please.
help, I don't know. So in meeting with all the departments on their priorities, there were departments that had submitted other projects in this first year. And we worked with those departments on whittling down their priorities to the projects that we felt as a whole were ones that we wanted to recommend to town meeting that we thought were very important. In particular, the school department submitted, I believe it was over almost $9.5 million worth of projects in this first year. They presented that last night in their presentation. So we strongly asked them to sort of look at their needs and those priorities and see which ones are absolutely necessary this year. So even though they have, priorities 1 through 8 or something like that, I don't think number 8 is something that they want to go without. So I just wanted to make that sort of general statement that every department really whittled down, what they were looking for as their priorities for this first year of our 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barrett. I think at this point we should take the vote on whether we separate out the enterprise funds, then vote on the enterprise funds, and then, like I said, pick at the rest if you want to. At least that way we can get something done in this half-hour segment. So we are voting at this point to separate out the enterprise funds from the rest of the CIC budget. And Ms. Butler, how do you vote? Don't look at me. I'm not your lifeline tonight.
Can I call my husband? I'll vote no.
Okay, we have a no from Ms. Butler. How about Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Lally.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro.
Yes.
Ms. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Rogers.
Yes.
Ms. Shaw.
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli.
Yes.
Okay, so that was a 13. Ms. Butler, under peer pressure, decided to make it a yes. We're unanimous. Okay, so we have voted now to separate out, and I know where this is going, to separate out the enterprise funds from the rest of the budget. So now we are going to make a motion to approve the enterprise funds on their own. So I would entertain, and I see Mr. Young.
So moved,
You
Mr.
want to
Chairman.
move that, and Mr. Dunn has a twitchy finger over there.
Second.
All right, you got it. We have a second. So now we're going to go into discussion about the enterprise funds. Any discussion? And we have a couple of hands. We have Mr. Zuccaroli. Your hand is still standing. The floor is yours.
No, thank you. It was just to make the motion,
Okay.
but that's already been done.
Thank you. Okay, without any further discussion, we are going to vote on approving the enterprise funds. And we'll start with Ms. Butler. Well, you can abstain as well. Okay, so that's a yes from Ms. Butler. Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Bizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli?
Yes.
Yes, unanimous, 14-0 to approve the enterprise funds. Okay. Now, on the table is the rest of this package. Does anybody...
Mr. Neerman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the rest of this package as it's written.
Okay. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll make it second.
That was Ms. Richards?
Ms.
Thank you.
Richards.
Mrs. Richards?
Ms.
Ms. Richards, sorry. So we have a second. A motion is on the table. Any discussion on any of these particular items? Mr. Lawler, are you okay with this? Okay, so I'm
Well,
going to
I want
go
to answer.
to...
I do want to answer your question. Am I okay with this?
I know you're conflicted.
I am not okay with this, but there are some items in here that I'm just looking at and just trying to figure out and get my arms around. I'm glad that we were able to separate the enterprise funds. There are some issues, but I'm gonna pass for now.
Okay, thank you. I see a... It's up to them. Ms. Rogers, I see your digital hand.
Yeah, I do want to just make a brief comment while we're in discussion that I know that in light of last night's meeting, a lot of our committee is now focused on trying to save money and figure out how we can make a difference with our operational budget. And I appreciate that that the town's issues have not fallen on deaf ears. So I do want to appreciate everyone on the committee for making that step. As it relates to these specific articles, as Lynn said, like, these are all important articles, whether they're ranked 1 through 37. And I think that each of these articles serves a greater purpose. So I'm comfortable with voting yes for all of these articles.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, and anytime you want to compliment the committee, you're welcome to raise your hand and I'll call on you. Any other discussions? Are we good? Oh, I see Mr. excuse me, Mr. Young.
Mr. Green.
Mr. Green, sorry.
I just have a question for my compatriots here, and maybe a learning lesson for me. If theoretically we have a budget deficit of, $2 million that we need to go for an override, is it possible to fund that through free cash? Question for anybody who knows more than me.
That's a Lynn Barrett question, isn't it? You're getting a lot of exercise tonight.
So, I guess the short answer is yes. You can appropriate free cash at town meeting for any purpose. However, it would not be recommended to do that because free cash is not necessarily something that we want to infuse into our regular operating budget, that those costs happen every single year. And if we continue to do that, then we will have no money for capital, which is also part of our, capital budget, which is very important.
It's like tapping the equity line in your house
Yeah.
over and over and over.
Right. To like equity line to like buy groceries. I wouldn't do that. That's just not a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other discussion before we take a vote on the rest of the CIC package, sans the enterprise funds? And without further discussion, we'll go to the roll call. Ms. Butler, can you be decisive on this one? No?
We're doing all of them, right?
All of them but the enterprise fund.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Richards. Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Zuparoli?
Yes.
Okay, so it was 13 yes, 1 no, and we came out with the same result as we would have if we kept it all together. But all right, so we have taken care of all the business that was on our agenda for today. Is there any new, old, or otherwise business that anybody on this committee would like to bring up? And hearing none, and everybody else can leave if you want to, unless you want to stay till the very end. There's nothing exciting coming up, so you're not going to miss anything by leaving. It's not like the ninth inning where the team, makes up 10 runs and wins the game. So, do you know something I don't, Mr. Dunn? All right. Is there any public? I noticed there was somebody on the Zoom whose name I did not recognize, but it looks like we might have bored him to tears. Yes, Carl Anderson.
He was on last night.
Okay, well, he's not here. All right.
I talked to him last night.
So let's go right to adjournment. Do I have? Oh, Mr. Zuparoli, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn for the evening.
Thank you so much. Your timing is impeccable. Okay, Ms. Shaw, I haven't called on you for all today. Would you like to second the motion to adjourn? Any discussion? No? Wow, you guys are awfully quiet. Okay, let's go through the roll call, and I will do this as quickly as humanly possible. Yes. Ms. Butler, you finally are decisive. Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
How did Ms. Butler vote?
This is
Sorry,
to adjourn.
Yes. I'm just kidding.
Okay,
I
Mr.
vote yes.
Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Zuparoli? It's
Yes.
unanimous. Thank you so much. Adjourned.
Our next meeting.